Hello and welcome to English for Philosophy Students. We are doing Jordan Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. And today we begin rule number 7. Rule number 7 is do what is meaningful, not what is expedient. And this is overall lesson number 48 in the Jordan Peterson book study. So we begin with a picture of, it's called the Pietà. This type of picture of the Virgin Mary with the dead body of Jesus is called a Pietà. And you have two little children looking at it. I'm not going to comment on why that picture is appropriate. In the last rule number 6, we spent a lot of time discussing the fact that life is difficult. Life sucks. And that if you just look at the chaos of the creation, the universe, it would be possible to be angry at God and to even feel that you or I am morally superior to God because we can see what a bad universe He created. So we can spit on God and then commit suicide or kill people to get them out of this terrible universe. And in the last rule, we saw that from some perspectives, that nihilism is rationally consistent. It's a response that makes sense from certain perspectives. Well, this rule number 7, begins where rule number 6 leaves off. So, we begin with the phrase, life is suffering. That's clear. So if you're just reading Jordan Peterson's book, hold on one sec. If you're just reading Jordan Peterson's book, you end rule 6 and move into rule 7, and there is continuity. There is transition. Also, when I looked over rule number 7, I noticed that it is a very long chapter, much longer than the last one, or the last two, and that the little subheading divisions are very long. So it's possible that we will not be able to do a complete subdivision on every lesson, although I'm going to try to do that tonight. Also, the material in this lesson is very philosophical, not nearly as practical as some of the rules. We will be drawing on understanding that we gleaned from earlier rules, particularly the first rule and some others that are more philosophical. So hopefully you have studied the entire book up until now so that all of this will seem familiar. So let's begin with this reading. The first subheading is Get While the Getting's Good. That is a phrase in English. I'm going to get while the getting's good. It means carpe diem, seize the day. It means don't waste any time. When your opportunity presents, grab it. Take advantage of it. Get while the getting's good. In this particular context, I think Jordan Peterson is going to give it a little bit of a negative twist. But in general English speaking, it's not considered bad or morally bad to get while the getting's good. Only it is considered expedient, which means practical and sensible, something that you would want to do for practical reasons with no consideration of morality or what is noble and pure, just what is utilitarian, what is practical. That is expedient. What is good for you for your benefit right now is what is expedient. And getting while the getting's good is expedient. And as you know, the rule is that we should pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. So, he is going to begin by talking about what is expedient. Getting while the getting's good is expedient. So, we will begin. Life is suffering. Full stop. That's clear. Full stop. He just in the last chapter, he spent pages and pages discussing the fact that life is suffering. So now he can simply say it in 3 words. Life is suffering, period. He doesn't need to defend it. The defense is in the previous chapter. So, life is suffering. That's clear. There is no more basic, irrefutable truth. Okay, when he says basic, he means at the root of reality, most fundamental, life is suffering. It is irrefutable. To refute something means to show that it is false. This one is irrefutable. You cannot show that it is false. It is manifestly clear that life is suffering. It's basically what God tells Adam and Eve immediately before he kicks them out of paradise. Basically, in this case, means more or less. Basically does not mean fundamentally in this context. It means more or less. That is what he's saying. Not exactly, not precisely, not literally, but basically, more or less, this is what God was saying, that life is suffering. So actually, the idea that this is what God was saying is not being strongly stated. Okay. But it is part of the story, a fundamental part of the story of Adam and Eve and the fall of mankind. Okay, so it's basically what God tells Adam and Eve immediately before he kicks them out of paradise. He is God, kicks them out, go, of paradise, the Garden of Eden. Now we have a quote, an extended quote from the Bible of what God said to Adam and Eve just before he made them leave the Garden of Eden, and he put a gate guarded by cherubim with flaming swords so that Adam and Eve could never return. And later, with a flood, he destroyed it, so it's gone forever. That's the story. So this is a quote of what God said. And Jordan Peterson is saying it basically means that life is suffering. All right, let's read it. Unto the woman, he said. Oh, one moment. unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake. In sorrow shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. By the sweat of your brow you will eat your food until you return to the ground, since from it you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. Genesis 3:16-19, KJV. KJV is the King James Version of the Bible. It was written in the 1600s, and so that would be the 17th century, and I believe it was early in the 1600s. So it's 400 years old, and the English in it is archaic. So it's actually not a good translation for modern study for most people, because it's not in modern language so that people can understand it. So the English here is archaic. I'll just make sure we understand all the English here. Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy sorrow and thy conception. What most people believe this means is, I will multiply your pain in childbirth. That is what people think this means. In sorrow thou shalt bring forth children. Again, pain in childbirth. And thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. There's actually quite a bit of controversy over what the phrase, thy desire shall be to thy husband, means. But certainly it's referring to some kind of struggle between husbands and wives. And he shall rule over thee is part of that struggle. I'm not prepared to say any more about what God is saying here. But this whole paragraph basically says the punishment for the woman for sin is increased pain and physical difficulty in childbirth and some kind of an emotional struggle having to do with marriage. Then for the husband, God says, so unto Adam he said, because, by the way, this capital is not really grammatically correct in modern English. A lot of what you see in here is not standard English today. Actually, in standard English today, we would usually use a capital letter for any pronoun referring to God. So that ought to be capital, and this one should be lowercase. And unto Adam he said, God said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, which means because you listened to your wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it. So, because you listened to your wife and disobeyed me by eating the fruit of that tree, cursed is the ground because of you. Cursed is the ground for thy sake, which means because of you. In sorrow, here we go again with the sorrow. Remember, they said, in sorrow you'll bring forth children. Well, here we have, in sorrow, thou shalt eat of it, the earth. So in sorrow you will gather food. So growing and gathering food will be a painful experience, difficult, all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles shall it bring forth to thee. So that just kind of sucks, doesn't it? You work so hard to plant and till crops, and thorns and thistles come up. And thou shalt eat the herb of the field. So basically, you'll work really hard, and there will be terrible weeds. You have to pull them, and they hurt you. Thorns, thistles sting. They're very hard to get out of the ground, but they'll just grow, and it'll all be terrible. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food. This means with a lot of work, labor. Labor will be required to get food. By the sweat of your brow, you will eat your food until you return to the ground, which means until you die. And ultimately, death was not part of their life before the sin. So now, of course, they will eventually die. Till you return to the ground, which means death, since from it, meaning from the ground, you were taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. In other words, God formed the first man out of dust, out of the earth, and breathed into him the breath of life. So now, because of sin, his body will return to the earth when he dies. So this is the state of mankind after the fall of Adam and Eve. Women will suffer to have children and will suffer in their relationships with their husband. Men will suffer needless problems in growing and gathering food. Problems that never should have been there. They've been put there on purpose to make it painful for men. So you can see why Jordan Peterson would say that basically what he's saying is life is suffering. That's clear. Okay? So, yeah. Existence as we know it today since the fall of man is primarily characterized by suffering. And we can put all the details into place. Every bad thing that happens because the creation has fallen is because of this sin, and it all got, the universe was subjected to the curse of Adam and Eve. Okay, so that's the idea of the book of Genesis. And what in the world should be done about that? Okay, so considering that life is suffering, what should be done about that? The simplest, most obvious, and most direct answer: pursue pleasure. Now, in the last chapter, the idea was life sucks, so you should call out God as being bad and then kill as many people as possible before committing suicide as a noble, rational, consistent act. Here he's saying, well, if life is full of suffering, maybe you should pursue pleasure. Pursue pleasure. Follow your impulses. Live for the moment. Do what's expedient. Lie, cheat, steal, deceive, manipulate. but don't get caught. Because if you get caught, society will punish you. Because if you do all those bad things, your behavior hurts society. Not that it's morally wrong, but it's bad for society, so society will punish you. So don't get caught. But make yourself feel good as much as you can without getting caught and punished. In an ultimately meaningless universe, what possible difference could it make? So if the universe is meaningless and your choice is to just suffer or suffer and enjoy what enjoyment you can get at the moment, it's better to get the enjoyment for yourself. Who cares? What difference does it make to the world? None. May as well enjoy as much as possible. That's the idea. In an ultimately meaningless universe, what possible difference could it make? And this is by no means a new idea. By no means it is not a new idea. And it's an emphatic way of saying this is not a new idea. This is a really common, old idea, universal idea that's been around forever. This by no means is the emphatic. This is by no means a new idea. The fact of life's tragedy and the suffering that is part of it has been used to justify the pursuit of immediate selfish gratification for a very long time. So this, oh darn, where did it go? This is this plain statement of all this. Okay, all this means this. Life's tragedy has been used to justify the pursuit of immediate selfish gratification for a long time. It's not a new idea that you can justify, you can legitimize, you can feel good about pursuing your own pleasure because life is so sucky. If life sucks, I have a right to get as much pleasure as possible. That's the idea. The fact that life sucks is the justification for being selfish. People say, why not be selfish? Life is meaningless and it sucks. I'm going to get what I can. This is a common response forever. Here's a quote. Short and sorrowful is our life. Oh wait, let's see who this quote is from. I think I know. I think this is the Book of Wisdom. Yes, here. The Book of Wisdom. Wisdom chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. Revised Standard Version. The Book of Wisdom is what they call apocryphal. It is part of the Apocrypha, which is a number of books of the Bible that have been excluded from the Protestant Bibles because they seem to teach things that aren't true and historically untrue as well as philosophically untrue. But the Catholic Bible retains these books and feels they have value, and they are ancient books. So this book would not be considered an authoritative part of the Bible by the Protestant world, but I think it would be by the Catholic world. Anyway, what it's saying in this passage seems to be that you should grab pleasure because the world sucks. And I think ultimately Jordan Peterson does not agree that this is really true wisdom. Okay, but he's using this quote to show that the idea of grabbing pleasure because the world sucks is ancient. The idea is ancient. I think that's why it's here, not because he believes it's really true that we should do this. Okay, so anyway, this is what it says. Short and sorrowful is our life, and there is no remedy when a man comes to his end, and no one has been known to return from Hades. Because we were born by mere chance, and hereafter we shall be as though we had never been, because the breath in our nostrils is smoke, and reason is a spark kindled by the beating of our hearts. When it is extinguished, the body will turn to ashes, and the away like the traces of a cloud, and be scattered like mist that is chased by the rays of the sun and overcome by its heat. For our allotted time is the passing of a shadow, and there is no return from our death, because it is sealed up and no one turns back. Come, therefore, let us enjoy the good things that exist and make use of the creation to the full as in youth. I'm going to just make a circle here. Let us take our fill of costly wine and perfumes, and let no flower of spring pass us by. Let us crown ourselves with rosebuds before they wither. Let none of us fail to share in our revelry. Everywhere let us leave signs of enjoyment, because this is our portion and this is our lot. Let us oppress the righteous poor man. Let us not spare the widow, nor regard the gray hairs of the aged, but let our might be our law of right. For what is weak proves itself to be useless. Okay, let us understand this. First of all, in the beginning, it's almost like they're bullet points. He's not making a complete case. Each of these sentences is essentially a reason for this. Okay? So he's got one, two, three, four. 4 reasons for advocating all of this. So all of this is his advice to us, and up here is the justification for it. 4 reasons. And we'll just real quickly go back and look at them again. Short and sorrowful is our life, and there's no remedy when a man comes to his end. No one returns from Hades. So, life is short, and it sucks. And then you die. We have a phrase in English, life sucks, then you die. It's a very negative, sort of nihilistic, cynical, pessimistic statement. People put it on the back of their car for a bumper sticker. Life sucks, then you die. Well, basically, that's what this one is. Life sucks, then you die. And after you die, you're not coming back. And your life is short. Next, because we were born by chance, and later it'll be as though we never were. And the breath in our nostrils is smoke, and reason is a spark kindled by the beating of our hearts. So, we were born by chance. There's no purpose in our life. After we leave, no one will remember us. We are not making an impact, not changing anything. The breath in our nostrils is smoke. So it's like we could easily stop breathing. It floats away and we die. And reason is a spark kindled by the beating of our heart. These days, people say that our very sense of consciousness, our very self-knowledge is just an illusion of the body. For some reason, our body has evolved this illusion of self-consciousness, and it's just a function of the body. That's what this is saying. Reason itself is not true ontologically. It is a function of our body, the beating heart. It's nothing. There is no reason, nothing that transcends, no order. Okay, that's what this one is. Then, next bullet point, when it is extinguished, the body will return to ashes. Hold on. All right, so when it is extinguished, the body will return to ashes and the away like traces of a cloud, and be scattered like mist that is chased by the rays of the sun and overcome by its heat. So, when we die, our body just disintegrates and blows away. And our passing is meaningless. The fact that we died, who cares? Our body will just disintegrate. And it'll be as though it never was. So our body, our consciousness, none of it has any eternality, nothing. And then finally, for our allotted time is the passing of a shadow, and there is no return from our death, because it is sealed up and no one turns back. So this is basically, life is really short. So insignificant. So short. And you can't come back. You only go around once. It's just so short, like the passing of a shadow. So, for all these reasons, therefore, let us enjoy the good things that exist. Make use of the creation to the full, as in youth. So, you know how young people, they just live to the full. Take our fill of costly wine and perfume. Let no flower pass you by. Crown yourself with rosebuds. No one fail to share in our revelry. Everywhere let us leave signs of enjoyment, because this is our portion. In other words, this is all we get. There's no pie in the sky, by and by. That's a phrase we use for heaven. Pie in the sky. Like in the sky when we're in heaven, they'll feed us pie. Pie in the sky. By and by. By and by means later. There's nothing later. What we can gather of on earth is what we get. There's nothing else. This is our portion. And this is our lot. So our portion suggests something positive, like this is what you get. Our lot suggests something negative, like this is all you get. And here, the next phrase is where it really shows its hand. If it ended here, it wouldn't be too bad. If it ended here, you could believe that this was good advice. If it ended here, seems reasonable. But they show their hand in the next sentence. Show your hand is from cards. When you're playing cards, you don't want anyone to see what cards you have. If you show your hand, then everybody knows what your intentions are. So the author shows his hand with the next. Let us oppress the righteous poor man. Righteous. This actually shows that they actually know some people are righteous and some are unrighteous. We are not in a values-free universe with no meaning. There is such a thing as objective goodness, moral goodness. And he's a poor man. And always God, whenever God spoke to prophets in the Bible, he said, you must take care of the poor. No, we're going to oppress a righteous poor man. If he's righteous, that means he's innocent and doesn't deserve any punishment. If he's poor, that means he is vulnerable and God says take care of him. We're going to oppress him. Let's oppress the righteous poor man. Let us not spare the widow. If you're going to spare someone, that means you're going to not let them be hurt. You're going to make sure they are defended against harm. And God always said, take care of the widows. Don't hurt the widows. So we're going to not spare the widows, nor regard the gray hairs of the aged. In the Ten Commandments, God says we are to honor our father and mother, and extrapolating, we are to honor age. We are to honor our elders. So basically, this sentence, let us oppress the righteous poor man, let us not spare the widow, nor regard the gray hairs of the aged, basically attacks the fundamental rules God has given his people to honor the poor, righteous poor, the widows, and the elderly. So, and he's saying, because of those 4 points in the beginning, life is short, life sucks, let's oppress the poor. And then finally, but, so this but, it's taking from before, let us oppress the righteous poor, not spare the widow, not regard the gray hairs of the age. Instead, let's, we're not going to do those good things. We are instead going to let our might be our law of right. So if you're strong, you can do anything you want. Might makes right. There is no right and wrong. It's only the strongest can do anything he wants. Might be our law of right. For what is weak proves itself to be useless. Okay, so this philosophy, might makes right. What is weak is useless. Let's oppress the righteous poor and the widows and the elderly. All of that is justified by the fact that life sucks. And Jordan Peterson, in my opinion, is including this passage in the apocryphal book of wisdom, not because he agrees with it, but because he is showing that the idea that life sucks, so take your pleasure, and who cares who you hurt, is an ancient idea. Let's move on. Actually, let me get another color. The pleasure of expediency may be fleeting, but it's pleasure nonetheless, and that is something to stack up against the terror and pain of existence. I'm going to get blue back because the idea is still the same. Every man for himself, and the devil take the hindmost, as the old proverb has it. Why not simply take everything you can get whenever the opportunity arises? Why not determine to live in that manner? Or is there an alternative, more powerful and more compelling? Okay, the pleasure of expediency. Expediency means doing what is good for you at the moment, without any respect for anything other than your practical ability to get something for yourself. Okay? The pleasure of expediency may be fleeting. That means it may be of short duration. For example, if you start stealing stuff for yourself, pretty soon society will take you to prison. The pleasure was short-lived. It's fleeting, but it is pleasure nonetheless. And that's something to stack up against the terror and pain of existence. So it may be of short duration, but it is a form of pleasure. And to have some pleasure is of value when you consider, so you're going to stack it up against, when you consider this terror and pain of existence in this world. So if you know you're going to have terror and pain, fear and sorrow, and you can get a little bit of pleasure, it's better than nothing, even though it's small and goes away quick. Every man for himself. That is a phrase in English. Every man for himself. That means take care of yourself. No one will help you. Just everybody. The police are coming. Run. Every man for himself. And then each person goes wherever they want without trying to help anyone else. And the idea is that, you'll do your best for yourself to get through. Every man for himself. And the devil take the hindmost, as the old proverb says. It would be kind of like shouting, everybody run! If your children cannot run, leave them behind! Save yourself! So the police or whoever's chasing will get the children because they are slow, but you will save yourself. So it's like devil take the hindmost means who cares about the person who is slow or who is at the back? Run as fast as you can and make sure you save yourself. And don't care about anyone who is slower, even if it is your beloved wife or child. Just curse them. Devil take them. Devil take the hindmost. Why not simply take everything you can get whenever the opportunity arises? So the question is, why not? Why not just take whatever you can get whenever you can get it? Why not determine to live in that manner? In other words, why not decide, this is how I will live? Or, is there an alternative, more powerful and more compelling? So it would be an alternative to the idea of just take whatever you want for yourself and don't care about others, because you're going to have a lot of suffering in your life and it'd be better to have some pleasure too. Or is there an alternative? More powerful and more compelling. Compelling is sort of like attractive and something you would kind of like to do. And of course, powerful is, you know what powerful is. So let's see. I wonder if that's the end of this section. No. I was hoping that was the end of the section. But let's continue a little further. Now we expect, and I used a new color, we expect a new idea now. He has introduced a new idea with the word or, and he has told us an alternative sort of way of life. So the questions were, why not do this? Why not? Well, maybe there's another way that would be more powerful and more compelling. What we read now will be that other way, probably. All right, let's see. Our ancestors worked out very sophisticated answers to such questions. These questions are, why not do it this way? Why not be selfish? Our ancestors worked out very sophisticated answers to such questions. But our ancestors worked it out. That means they figured it out. They figured out sophisticated, that means complex, answers to this question. But we still don't understand them very well. So our ancestors knew, but we don't understand it very well. This is because they are, in large part, still implicit, manifest primarily in ritual and myth, and, as of yet, incompletely articulated. Okay, so the answers to the question of why not live selfishly. Our ancestors figured something out, but we don't understand it because the answers are, in large part, so primarily, fundamentally, implicit. These answers are not written in books. These answers are not discussed in philosophical dialogues and monologues and treatises. They are built in to rituals and myths. So in order to intuitively apprehend the answer, we have to delve into ritual and myth. And some of the answers will bubble up from within our being, but they're not clear, not like the 10 Commandments, which are perfectly clear. These answers are harder to understand and to articulate. Means to speak, but it also means to define. For example, concrete example. Imagine a story in which, very simply, a boy takes responsibility for the mistake of his friend and ends up getting punished for the friend. In this story, you can feel the nobility of the boy. You can feel the courage of the boy. You can sense the tragedy of the punishment of the wrong person. You can feel the gratitude of the boy who didn't get punished. Maybe he is weak, maybe he, whatever. But what you cannot do is write down a moral law that says you must always confess to any crime someone else has done and take the punishment for them. You sense in your heart when this is a noble and appropriate and godlike action, but you can't really turn it into a statute or a clear principle of when you should do it. This kind of nobility is implicit in this kind of story, but the actual details of what should be done elude us. We can't make a universal law out of it. Okay, so that's my understanding of what he is saying. So, as of yet, these things are incompletely articulated. They're not fully defined. We act them out and represent them in stories, but we are not yet wise enough to formulate them explicitly. That's what I was just saying. We are still chimps in a troop or wolves in a pack. We know how to behave. We know who's who and why. So we know which boy we should volunteer to take the punishment for and which boy we should not. Who's who. And we've learned through experience. Our knowledge has been shaped by our interaction with others, other people. We've established predictable routines and patterns of behavior, but we really don't understand them or know where they originated. So, for example, we know that in times of famine, parents will give the food to their children. And if the child dies or a family member dies, they will not eat that family member or that child, even though to eat the child or the family member might sustain life through the famine. They won't do it. But how can you really write down the rules that govern why you should not eat the dead body of your child or the dead body of a family member who starved because of famine? How can you write that? I mean, what is the reason? There's no obvious reason, but we all kind of know you're not supposed to do that. It would be better to die than to descend to that level. So, anyway, these are kind of the examples of things. All right, so they've evolved, meaning our understanding of how to behave, like not eat your dead bodies, okay? These behaviors, these understandings have evolved over great expanses of time. No one was formulating them explicitly, at least not in the dimmest reaches of the past, even though we've been telling each other how to act forever. He is referring to his understanding of the evolution of the human psyche that he talked about in chapter 1. The idea being our psyche. Now he believes this. Some people don't believe evolution in this way. I myself don't believe in evolution in this way. However, he was saying that like back when life was much simpler, it kept evolving and developing, and eventually before we were even fully human, we had a lot of behaviors that came from our prehistoric, pre-human biological ancestors. And eventually, here we go, one day, not so long ago, we woke up. That means we became self-conscious as human beings and started writing down history and writing down philosophy. But before we evolved into this Homo sapiens, we were, according to him, some lower form, something closer to an ape. And we still had social rituals that we engaged in that are still part of our basic deep psyche. That's what he's saying. So he's saying all of these understandings evolved really deep down and far away, far back. And recently, say 5,000 years ago, we started being self-conscious and reflective and trying to understand philosophy. Okay. One day, however, not so long ago, we woke up. We were already doing, but we started noticing what we were doing. So we were already not eating the bodies of our family members, but now we began to notice that it would be terrible to eat the body of your family member, for example. We started using our bodies as devices to represent their own actions. We started imitating and dramatizing. So we started having early artistic plays where they put stories on display, where people would behave in certain ways, and Like, for example, you could have a play of a boy taking the punishment for a guilty party, an innocent boy. That could be the plot of a play. We invented ritual, such as the ritual of sacrifices, where the Jews would put their hands on a goat and impart their sins onto the goat, and then drive the goat away with the idea that he's taking my sins away, or kill the goat with the idea that he is taking the punishment for my sins. Ritual. We started acting out our own experiences. Then we started to tell stories. We coded our observations of our own drama into these stories. In this manner, the information that was first only embedded in our behavior before we were sufficiently evolved to be reflective became represented in our stories. So first it was embedded in our behavior unreflectively. Then we woke up and began reflecting, but we didn't really understand it. We were just able to sort of make stories about it. And actually, we're still in that phase where much of these kind of nobler ideals are in the great literature, but they're not yet in jurisprudence. They're not yet in law. They're not yet articulated fully. The Ten Commandments articulates morality fully as far as it goes, but we know there's much more above that. Thou shalt not kill is a pretty low standard. Even Jesus Christ came and said, thou shalt love thy neighbor as yourself. So that's obviously on another dimension, in another dimension than just don't kill him. Okay, so in this manner, the information that was first only embedded in our behavior became represented in our stories, but we didn't and still don't understand what it all means. Okay, we're going to have to stop there. I'm actually really enjoying this. More next week. See you later.